What's good, folks? Welcome to the Cover One Film Room, the show that gives you the hows and the whys behind both the good and the bad for the Buffalo Bills. I'm one of your two hosts, Anthony Prohaska, joined as always by Erik Turner. And Erik, Bills football, NFL football has started to come back. The past couple of days, some teams entered camp early and have been practicing for a couple of days. But today, Wednesday, July 24th, football is back for the Buffalo Bills. Day one of training camp. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. And then we also have a really fun episode where we reached out in the Twitterverse and then also to our Cover One insiders for some mailbag questions, which was a really awesome time. I even messaged you and Chris in our film room chat of just like, you kind of put the bat signal out, and immediately like the amount of responses from the insiders, the volume of questions, but also the quality of questions were good. So we've got some really fun stuff to dive into tonight. We start to really, football's back. I feel like a couple weeks from now, like preseason will be hitting, and then before we know, regular season will be hitting. I know we're so close. It's back.
No, I'm sure it was great to be out there for day one, although they're not in pads, but just the feeling, the senses, the smell, everything, all the crowd there, the beautiful weather. Of course, we're going to go over some of those day one takeaways from you being on scene there at St. John Fisher. We're going to talk about maybe some of the embedded video, some of the stuff that we kind of gleaned from that episode a few days ago. And then as you talked about some questions from our insiders, as is often the case, we get a lot of our topics, our segments, and ideas from our insiders, our people in our Discord channel. That's the thing, man. We've switched over from Slack and now we're using Discord, which, listen, I didn't think was a huge deal, a big move, but the feedback has been great. The capabilities are great. We can go in there and do like, freestyle film rooms in there and share it, live just with insiders, the different channels that we have. We brought all the same channels, film channels, analytics, food, movies. I mean, there's a little bit of everything in the Discord channel and the Discord server.
Yeah, absolutely. And I play with it like every day. I'm still not like efficient with like replying to someone in the thread. Like I'm clicking things and it's like, oh, do you want to move this here? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, oh, direct message. I'm like, no, I don't want a direct message. And I've gotten a little better. I responded to one today directly. It made me feel better. But yeah, a lot of positive feedback from it. We know a lot of people that are on like that platform, and then the feedback from our insiders. And I think just the user interface, how clean everything is, the maintenance of the channels and everything. I think like the way it delivers updates and how it kind of succinctly puts everything together really honestly delivers like a better user experience. It's a lot cleaner. So yeah, we're very pumped to obviously have made that move and then be able to glean, questions and footage and comments from that for this episode, like we would have done in Slack, but just in a more efficient way under Discord. So it's a really good time for us.
Yeah. So if you're not an insider yet, it's our premium content. You get to join our community in Discord, and the more people you talk to, they join because of that ongoing conversation about the Bills, about the NFL, about whatever you want, really. You have, again, video channels, you have audio channels. It's fun. Join us every single day. Now's the time. We have guys like yourself and Thomas that were out at camp, today for day one. And so let's dive right into day one of training camp for the Buffalo Bills. And we're going to start on the offensive side of the ball. What was maybe one big topic and one big takeaway that you saw on the offensive side of the ball out at St. John Fisher today?
It has to be just all the movement, pre-snap, motions, and shifts. I hate putting like a percentage on it, but if I had, like, if you pressed me and were like, what percentage of offensive snaps today between 7-on-7, low red zone stuff, team, everything? Well, the heavy majority of team was actually not even heavy majority. All the team stuff they did today was red zone, some low and then some medium and some just barely inside the 20. I would say probably about 95% of the offensive snaps had at least one motion or shift. Wow. And it was like, even just, it started. So they did some low red zone stuff, like after they like right off rip to open up. Both those had motion and shifts. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Then we get into 7-on-7, 9-on-9 plays, all had motion and shifts. Then we get into team, and I started counting, and then I just stopped counting because every single play had like motions and shifts. And I'm talking everything from return motion, jet motion, exit, or that cheetah motion that the Dolphins do with Tyreek Hill, That tear motion where the running backs is behind or next to Allen, and Allen gives him the signal and he takes off, a la what the 49ers like to do with McCaffrey. Or you see it a lot in college football too. Michigan did it a bunch.
Stretching like kind of horizontally, right?
Exactly, just to give them that little bit of like extra leverage piece to kind of beat their man to the flat, or seeing who goes with them. And also what's interesting too, like the first several times they did it, nobody would go with like Cook or go with Davis. And you could tell Allen knew he had it, but like didn't want to cheat and take it, and was trying to go for like some other stuff downfield. Then the defense adjusted with it after. But yeah, just seeing all the motions and shifts, and sometimes you're seeing guys shift at the same time. They're doing multiple. The very first rep for 7-on-7 is a 3-by-1 where Dalton Kincaid is in the backfield with Josh Allen and Gunn. Allen calls the shift. I think it was, I forget who was the end man on the line of scrimmage on the one side. He widens out. Kincaid replaces him, takes his place in the slot, and then they snap the ball. Just a lot of movement nonstop. And then being able to tie that into the play action and marrying of the run and pass was nice. Something that they were doing. Matt Collins would be the single receiver. He'd be the X on the side. And they'd send that return motion. For those who don't know, it's like he's coming across in jet motion, and then he stops and returns and comes back to where he was. And they'd do that, and they'd run the ball, and Matt Collins would be a blocker. And then they'd show the same formation, same look, same return motion, and it would be a play action pass or a straight pass. And now Hollins is he's already moving. He's beating his man out the front door, easy completion to the flat. Just all the movement. It really took me by surprise. Not just that there was more of it, but it was happening on almost like every single play for the entirety of practice.
Right. And that type of motion and shifting is meant to do several things. As we always talk about, sometimes it's trying to identify man versus zone if it's a pass. Sometimes it's, identifying like a matchup they just want to attack, or to identify a coverage, whether it be zone or man, specifically what kind of coverage. But what the Bills are going to do a lot this year is use motion to create leverage in the run game. And now when you're talking about those return motions and how the Niners use it, how the Eagles use it, what it does is a lot of times when you're taking that receiver from out wide, you're bringing them towards the quarterback and center and then bringing them back out. A lot of times that corner is, if it's zone coverage, he's going to fall off and drop, deeper into 7 to 9 yards. And now you have a wide receiver adding into the run game closer to the box, off the tight end, able to insert against a linebacker or a safety that's dropping down into the box. And it's creating leverage and getting a hat on a hat at the point of attack when you're talking that run game, especially in those type of formations and sets where the quarterback's under center. You're trying to stay in between the tight end and the tackle box and run inside. So getting a hat on a hat to get the leverage that you want in the run game is incredibly important, not just for the pass game. And when you talk about, doing those sort of things, that's why it's nice to have those bigger wide receivers, like you said, Matt Collins, like, Keon, Coleman, even quasi type receiver tight ends like Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox. You can use them in that way as well. Chase Claypool. That kind of leads me into that next segment. Is I like the use of motion, especially for the passing game, but the run game, it's going to be even a bigger part this year with the size they have at wide receiver. When you're talking Coleman, when you're talking Matt Collins, and guys like Chase Claypool, I think that is really kind of what stood out when I was gleaning some of the topics from what I saw on social media. I think that size is going to play a major factor at the wide receiver position, not just in the pass game, but also in the run game.
Yeah, and even with some of the like non-prototypical big guys, it was working well today. Like Curtis Samuel is a good example. He was in motion all the time, whether he was run blocking or there was going to be a pass. And the way they tie that in, sometimes it was just a shift. And what we've seen before, like he'd shift and Shakir would shift, and they'd both be hipped off the line of scrimmage, and they'd run duo like we've seen Gabe Davis and Trent Sherfield do like a million times. Then they would shift and show that look, and Samuel would go across in jet motion, and it would be a pass, and he'd be open in the flat because he out leveraged his man and got there faster. Then they'd run that similar look, but he was the lead blocker, and they'd run split zone, or they run those pieces like that.
And think about that. They could tag a run and pass together that uses that very same motion, right? And this is what you're talking about, marrying the pass and the run game. You could use that motion to create that leverage in the run game. If they are in, zone coverage, then, you can run it. Now, if they see man coverage and Samuel's that guy that's in motion, as you said, you can run him all the way across the formation, have that guy man coverage trying to trail with him and work through traffic, and you get a quick pass off the edge. So that's what Anthony means when marrying the run and the pass game, and how you can use not just those big receivers, but also those speedy receivers, depending on really the play call. You could have two calls in the huddle. The Bills and teams do it all the time. They'll have a run and a pass called, making those two look similar, and building off of those concepts, whether it's a run or a pass, is really the next level at the NFL. It's really baseline, behaviors for offenses.
True. Yeah, and seeing more of that incorporated into this offense was so like enticing early on, and they really forced the defense to have to communicate early and often. And the defense wasn't on point today with their communication. It showed because the offense got the better of them. I would say for the majority of the day, although Bills, the ones and even the twos got some pressure up front, but that's not going to be called down or anything like that at this point in camp. But yeah, just flooding those zones, making guys understand who's passing off to who, if someone's in man, who's going with who. And then also there was more reduced formational width, more condensed formations today. Things were tighter. A lot of like nub tight end sets, or that tight end, it might not be in line, but he's still right off the tackle and kind of like a wing. And then there's three to the other side. A lot of tight bunches that are close to the right tackle or left tackle, even going 2 by 2, but kind of keeping everybody within the numbers. I think that condensed formation piece also helped with what they were doing with motion, because they're bringing everybody in tight. And instead of spreading everything out and having bodies out in space pre-snap, they were flooding the space outside with bodies post-snap and forcing the defense to have to communicate, pass off, follow them. And it was just very stressful time for the defense, all because of the condensed formations, the motion, the shifting, everything, and then really good precision and timing within all of that. Josh Allen said it today after practice when he was talking to the presser, like all the work they did in Nashville when everybody got together this offseason, and it really showed with how on point everyone was with their timing and how succinct and tight everything was. Even with the second and third teamers, like the offense was really clicking despite all the movement and everything that was going on, where it can be easy to kind of trip over yourself a little bit.
Yeah, and I love day one, even though they're not in pads. I love day one, but I also love day one of practice when they have the pads on. Because day one, as you talked about, the area that they focus on are usually the most important times and most important downs and distances, the most important areas of the field, the red zone, the low red zone. Those are usually where day one you're starting right there, because you're trying to stress that, you're trying to rep. And so day one, that's what, you added the context. There are a lot of low red zone, a lot of, passing plays and marrying of plays. Like, that is good to hear. A lot of motion and shifting. That's all great to hear on day one at training camp. And when you talked about Josh and the rapport they're building with the wide receivers, one obviously connection that we saw today was between Josh and Keon Coleman, the rookie wide receiver. And, kind of goes back to that whole conversation about size and hands and, something we're going to talk about later, working the entire field. And this is one of those plays where Josh hit Keon Coleman along the boundary out to his right, and you can see the snag along the boundary. And it's the size and the hands and concentration by Coleman that allows Josh to even consider making this throw. He's going to be able to make throws like this where he's throwing it out of bounds, but Coleman, with his hands, his catch radius and his long arms, he'll be able to snag it along the boundary and do these type of things. And you can see just from the body language right there, I would imagine he caught it a little late as far as tracking it, just because he kind of caught it. He's leaning back like that, but those are the type of things that he's going to bring to this offense that maybe they didn't quite have when you're talking the dynamics of the traits of the receivers, whether you're talking wide receiver, tight ends, that we hadn't quite seen in the past. So seeing this type of play with the velocity from the throw from Josh Allen, and then the catch along the boundaries and the toe drag swag and concentration along the boundary, that's what Coleman is going to bring. That's what some of the size is going to bring in Matt Collins, Chase Claypool, and others when we're talking the passing game, not just the running game.
The hands on this one. So I remember I tweeted about this play when it happened. Coleman runs, he's the outside receiver to start the play, and basically runs like a deep sit or like a deep comeback. And Allen fires it as Coleman is coming out of his break. So, and you nailed it, like almost like he caught it late. Because when he comes out of his break, that ball is on him. Like, he's coming out of his break right there. He doesn't even have to come back to it too much.
So let me flesh this out. So it was kind of like a stop route where he's running, he pivots inside, but doesn't necessarily curl it up or come back. He kind of hinges to the boundary, right? He kind of
Mhm.
his back's to the sideline. He kind of hinges back like that, and I assume that's how the body kind of ended up in that manner along
Yeah.
the boundary. Is that the type of route he ran? We call like a hinge.
Exactly. So he
Yeah.
he breaks down, shakes kind of like he's going inside,
Yep.
plants off his left foot, and isn't going out, isn't cornering, is literally kind of like hinging and turning back around and almost like 45-degree
Yes.
angling
Towards the
towards
boundary.
exactly. And as
Yes.
soon as but he doesn't like because when Allen throws it, it was a good anticipatory throw in addition to having arm strength with it. Because of when Allen threw it, it's on him as soon as he plants off his left
Right.
foot. So he turns and he's like, "Oh shit," and
Yeah.
like just plucks it. And it was a bullet, and you heard nothing. Granted, I was a little like farther away, but it was just such a soft hands catch. He plucked it out of the air. I thought today he was. I don't want to do this because I'm not ready for everybody to be like Stephon Diggs who and Gabe Davis who. But
Right.
for what Keon Coleman was in college, I thought today kind of was advertised with the athleticism, the size. Yeah, this was a nice catch early on in the third segment of practice. You just see the easy rotation in the air, how he
Right.
goes up, he's able to pluck it, comes back down. Like I think you saw the size and athleticism and frame and coordination and all of it show up regularly for him today. I still think, things that you and I want to see like
Yeah.
tightness in his routes and crispness in his footwork. And I think that can potentially come with the work that he'll put in. But just for that baseline, I thought his size and athleticism and hands showed up today and played well.
Yeah, and I think, as I said, that size when we're talking the receiver room this year, it's not only going to add physicality in the run game, but it's going to add that size and ability in the red zone, and that's where the Bills.
Yeah.
Josh said it today in his presser. They need to get 7 points on the board more than they did last year, and I think this is why you see on day one them working those high point throws. Whether you're talking that the play along the boundary or
Mhm.
the one we just showed right there in the low red zone, and that red zone stuff is important. If we look at some of these stats from True Media, red zone touchdown since 2020 for prior Bills and some on the roster still, Diggs had 29 touchdowns, including the regular season and the playoffs. If we're talking red zone, so inside that 20-yard line or in. Dawson Knox 22. That's a sneaky one that we need to
Yeah,
keep an
right.
eye on now that he is not the primary tight end when we're talking, him and Kincaid. Gabe Davis 19
Mm.
red zone touchdowns. Curtis Samuel since 2020 had 8. Chase Claypool 8. Matt Collins 6. Shakir 3. Dalton Kincaid 0 so far. So these are some of the targets that the Bills now have, and just showing you what they lost in the red zone. Who's going to step up when it comes to scoring red zone touchdowns? And I think whether Claypool makes the roster, Matt Collins seems to be a lock. I
Mhm.
think those guys can pitch in there, and of course Kincaid. I mean, he's going to be a threat, not necessarily with the high point, but he did make a high point catch here for a touchdown today.
He did, yeah.
But he did some other things, in between the 20s as well. It seemed like he was one of the go-to guys, one of the primary options for Josh Allen today.
Yeah, he looked every bit like what we talked about, like the true number one or the
Mhm.
option one in terms of the passing attack for this offense. And it continued on what he was last year: crisp, efficient, clean movement, not a lot, if any, wasted motion, good deception. He may have had one more, but for my count, 3 touchdowns in red zone work, one
Wow.
on a seam ball from maybe about like the 15 or the 10, where he went up to climb the ladder and got it. If there's pads on or it's a real game and the bullets are live, he might get lit up, but he climbed the ladder and brought that one down.
I think this is it right here, right? Versus Taylor Rapp.
You see, yep, this is it. Boom. Yep, goes up,
See,
gets
and
it.
this is what I'm talking about, man. These are things that really Allen didn't have the ability to kind of maximize in prior years. Maximizing not just like, especially we're talking red zone. Yeah, they have that 10-yard, depth when you're talking the
Mhm.
red zone depth, but now they have targets that can go up and get the ball and play above the rim and really extend the strike zone. Like you see here, Kincaid going up and over Rapp on this play for the would-be touchdown. Like, it's nice to have these type of weapons. One, but it's also nice to see Josh trusting those guys to make these type of
Yes.
catches in traffic.
And he even said today with the presser, like he's had to adjust more to throwing these types of balls to like Matt Collins and Keon and like putting it even higher than normal because they want it higher. They want to be able to separate at the catch point. And this was a good example, like allowing Kincaid to go up and climb the ladder. Because this honestly, that's not bad coverage from Taylor Rapp. Like he's right on Kincaid. So Allen puts it where only Kincaid can get it. And then Kincaid goes up, climbs the ladder, and brings it down. This one was really nice. This one was the third one. And the first 2 touchdowns, one of them was the route we've seen a million times where he's in the slot. He gets lined up one-on-one on a linebacker, can pick what he wants, he was on the left side of the formation, puts his left foot in the ground, runs a slant across the middle, creates 4 yards separation, touchdown. That was on, I think it was either Milano or Bernard, but I'm pretty sure it was on Milano. And then another one, they shifted him from the left side of the formation to the right side as the inline tight end. This was low red zone, stopped like a yard inside the goal line, made it look like he was going to pop out, but pivoted and came back inside, almost kind of like a jerk route, and caught it right on Terrell Bernard. As soon as he turned back inside, Allen pinned it right on him. He was consistently creating separation today. He showed athleticism. He showed precision. It was a really nice showing for him. Honestly, it's similar to, you were at camp last year and so was I. Similar to what we saw last year. Like as soon as he showed up, you saw the technicality, you saw the fluidity, and it just looks to be continuing for him, in addition to understanding what we've talked about so much with him, his feel for leverage, his feel for space, his understanding of where to sit down and where to move to get open. A really, really, really strong showing from him today.
And Walter asks and adds the question, though, will Kincaid play like this in traffic in game when the pads are on? Kincaid, for as good as he was last year, multiple instances where he couldn't come away with the ball. 9 contested catches last year. He got 5 of them. And that's a 55.6 contested catch percentage. That's above average. It's actually not that bad a number. I believe he was a killer when it came to contested catches in college. But I don't think his issue was necessarily at the catch point, consistently having issues there with contact. It was getting through that contact initially when he's working through that, that second level. But I think as the year went on, he did a much better job of doing that and bringing those passes in. I mean, let's see, 2.
Also, just 3, for your reference, his career in college contested catch percentage 58.8%, including a 2021 season where he had a 77.8 contested catch percentage.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that at all, Walter. So I'm you'd have to kind of explain that a little more, where you came to that conclusion.
Oh, he says more so mean in the red zone, more specifically. Okay. So he's thinking I'm thinking of the one.
So how many targets did he have in the red zone though? Like not many, right?
I'm thinking of the one where he got lit up. I don't remember who it was against, but Allen tried to make a tight window throw and he got absolutely blasted.
Yeah, there was one against the Raiders where they ran like a DNO post with him. There's a post safety there. Josh shouldn't have even thrown it.
He got wrecked.
And he got wrecked. And that's not on Kincaid. That's on Josh. Shouldn't have been thrown. He had a corner over the top, a defender over the top, and then a post safety sitting in there. I don't even think that was necessarily on him. That's a play that really kind of comes to mind with him. I can try to bring up a few, but no, I don't worry about that when it comes to Kincaid. He's going to be a threat in the red zone. I even left out Keon Coleman when we're looking at that chart. Coleman had 8 red zone touchdowns over the course of his career in college. So at Florida State and Michigan State. So again, he will obviously, as we showed you, be a threat in the red zone and being able to, again, not just use, your route running, your physicality at the top routes in the red zone in that condensed area, but using, your basketball skills, going up, climbing the ladder and making it and extending that strike zone along the boundaries, as you saw there on that catch and that hinge route. Those are different areas that on day one, I'm happy to hear they are attacking those strike zones, because it's not necessarily something they did a bunch of because of the type of weapons they had over the last few years when you're talking wide receivers and even tight ends for that matter.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's nice to just see them. This is going to sound so like simplistic or maybe like dumb to people, but it's just good to see them leaning into what they have. Like you've got size and athleticism at your tight end grouping and wide receiver grouping. Cool. Lean into that. And them leaning into that while still mixing in the stuff for Curtis Samuel. Again, like he was basically in motion like almost every single time he was out there, watching him mix it up with the run in terms of his blocking. And then also even Khalil Shakir, who I think had a good day as well, an individual, but also some of the 7-on-7 work and red zone work. like you're doing all of this physical size, athleticism, high point stuff. And then you've got Shakir in the slot who's just running routes with deception and precision and crispness and running jerk routes and slants and faking it over and coming back and doing like rewind stuff. It was a nice mix for what Joe Brady was doing today in terms of pushing the right buttons, pulling the right levers, and how he dressed it all up. I thought was a really nice package. I'm very interested to see how the defense kind of comes back and battles as we go forward the next couple of days. I don't think it was as bad of a performance for the defense as I saw some people kind of reporting. Like, man, the offense crushed them today. Granted, the offense did like score a bunch, but there were several of those scores that wouldn't have counted if the Bullets were live. Like Von Miller won around the edge, would have had Allen. Greg Rousseau won around the edge, would have had Josh Allen. They got some pressure in the middle too, but overall, just a good start for the offense considering the new coordinator, the new kind of system that they're running, and all the new faces. I mean, all the people we've talked about so far basically are like new people. Curtis Samuel and Mac Hollins and Keon Coleman and Kincaid returns, but he was a rookie last year. Like Ray Davis got some action as well. The offense was really humming today. It was very good to see.
No, it's that's great to hear when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. So aside from that, what stood out on the other side of the ball? If we're talking defense, what were some newsworthy plays, players, situations that arose on the defensive side of the ball day one at camp?
For me, it starts with Matt Milano and even Von Miller, both of them practicing fully, no restrictions. I didn't know what to expect for that. I didn't know if Milano would do individual and then kind of chill when it came to team. I didn't know if he would do half the practice and then kind of sit out in the back, but he did every drill. When they went team, he was with Terrell Bernard and the ones, every single rep with the ones. Von Miller, very similar. He was running with the twos, but then they would rotate him and Epinesa with the ones. He hit every drill. He did everything. So seeing them both kind of return. Granted, Miller played last year, but kind of returning somewhat more to form considering getting that extra year off from the Achilles injury. It was nice to see him with that. And then just newsworthy, Damar Hamlin getting run with the ones at safety. I was talking with Joe Marino last night on the show, and he mentioned that piece. Like, oh, I wonder if it's Hamlin. And in my mind, I was ready to see Edwards and Rapp, or I was thinking Bishop. And then Hamlin came out, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe they'll rotate a little bit. And it stood that way the same time, or the same for the entirety of practice. Rapp and Hamlin with the ones, Edwards and Bishop with the twos. Granted, Bishop's a rookie. Edwards has been banged up, so maybe they're kind of just gearing him up to speed a little bit. And I don't want to. It's tough to see because you can't. I feel like blind in nailing coverages and responsibilities without the all 22. But there were a lot of blown coverages in their red zone work from a back end perspective, and I don't know if the disconnect was between the safeties and the linebackers, but really, from seam to seam or almost number to number, some blown coverages against tight ends, slot receivers, guys coming in, they just weren't very sharp from a pass-off communication standpoint on the defense. But just from a noteworthy standpoint, it was kind of seeing them struggle a little bit as a unit. Second and third team defense did pretty well. They were attacking the ball all day. And just seeing Milano and Von Miller kind of playing with juice, especially Miller. I don't want to put it out there that like he's back, but man, he had several, like he beat Spencer Brown around the corner at one point and it was clean. Like he just jumped off the line, dipped and bent underneath him. And it was real pretty and real smooth. It made my antennas perked up.
I'm not surprised with that. Like I expect Von to bounce back. May he lose a quarter step, half a step when you're talking explosiveness physically off the ball. Yeah, that may be true. There may be a slight dip when it comes to exploding off the ball, but his snap anticipation will be the same. His ability to understand when that offensive lineman is going to shoot their hands, the kick slide timing, and how they the offensive tackle tries to time the hands with the feet. He knows how to win as a pass rusher. I am not worried about Von Miller this year. I expect Von Miller to be that threat, to be that closer like he was before he got injured. And like I said, I think there may be a dip when it comes to the explosiveness, but I do expect him to come back and be that pass rush winner that he's been his entire career. He's too knowledgeable. He's too wise. He's seen too many different types of pass blocking. He's seen all the different types of pass sets and protections and ways that guys help tackles with tight ends and running backs. Like, he's seen it all. He's
Yeah.
beat it all. And so I do expect him to bounce back and be that closer like, in prior years, especially when he did come over to Buffalo. But Matt Milano participating was pretty big, in my opinion. Seeing him cut, in some of those back pedal drills, just in the drills themselves, just seeing it with your own eyes was nice
Yeah.
to see, because last
I
year,
was perked up watching him in those, like,
yeah,
just I wanted to make sure he was going the same speed as Bernard and Taron Johnson and everybody in the defense when they were running triangles and doing all those things. I was like, is he is he hesitant? Is he planting properly? But yeah, like you said, it was full tilt. He was out there. You would never know that he suffered a pretty significant injury last year.
so we're looking at some splits from 2023, just to give you an idea how much of an effect that Milano had on the defense. I don't think this is any surprise to anyone, but again,
Mhm.
just to show you some visual evidence when we're talking how offenses attack the Bills when Milano's on the field versus when they're off. So typically when Milano's on the field, you see the column right here under offensive personnel usage percentage. You can see how the offensive personnel changes. A lot of times teams want to, use 21 personnel, so 2 running backs, 1 tight end. So sometimes with a fullback, kind of go heavier if you're talking about, running the ball against the Bills' lighter linebackers in
Mhm.
Bernard and Milano. You see 15%, 21 personnel usage. And then when he was off the field, it was 5. And you saw that increase go to 11 personnel. So they started to spread out the
Mhm.
Bills more. And then obviously that's because Milano is not on the field and you're able to pass a little more
Mhm.
with him off the field, because Milano is a true matchup linebacker. He can
Mhm.
match up with essentially any position there. I mean, we even saw him match up with Tyreek Hill and take him away
Mhm.
early in Tua's reads in that matchup last year early in the season.
Yeah,
He's
that was quick.
obviously that type of player on defense. Now, if you even look at some of the blitz percentage, this one kind of surprised me. So defensive tendencies in the right side right here, blitz percentage with Milano, the Bills only blitz about 13% of the time.
Mm.
When he's on the field, when he's off the field, they have to ratchet up that pressure just a little bit more to get the quarterback off the spot, to speed up his processor so
Mhm.
that he can't just pick apart the defense. Those are just 2 little areas that you see how offenses change things and really attack the Bills defense when Milano is on versus off the field.
Yeah, man, he was such he is such an integral piece for the defense. But really, last year in the games that we saw him playing in conjunction with Bernard and what they were doing from a front perspective, we broke it down so much. Though, and you mentioned the Miami game; it was so
Mm,
perfect. Just the way they attacked Miami and how that built upon what they did the previous week against Washington, what they did the previous week against the Raiders, and even a good defensive performance in week 1 against the Jets. This how they were able to rely on the front 4, but then work in those 5 and 6 man pressures
mhm,
and have creepers and Sims. And Milano was such a huge part of that because he is a good blitzer and they only need to rush 4 and he can be one of the 4 and they can drop out AJ
mhm,
Epinesa or drop out whoever they would. Rousseau will drop sometimes and they'll send Bernard. He's such an integral part of what they do from just a regular core coverage philosophy and structure. But then in terms of what they can do in terms of when they get creative, when they try to mix it up, when they try to use some of those designers and manipulate offenses and dictate to them and dictate their protections to them, and seeing it represented there in the numbers just kind of drives that even more home. And it was that's again why it was like one of my highlights today. I think him and Bernard playing together can be such a fun thing this year. And that
yeah, can't
second
wait.
level of defense of Milano, Bernard, and Taron Johnson, 2 of those 3 dudes are already all pros, and Terrell Bernard is on a potential all pro trajectory. Like that second level can just be so awesome from a schematic potential perspective. And it starts with Milano and just goes from there. So it was just awesome seeing him back
Yeah.
today and having no restrictions and also not having any restrictions physically, but also, and I guess he shouldn't have anything mentally because it was kind of like a freak injury, but it was nice to see him not playing hesitant or like testing his leg out too much. And maybe he did that
I
earlier.
think there is a mental side to that though, because he did have a setback. Didn't
Oh,
heal
fair.
as quickly as it should have been. So, but knowing him, even if it was bothering him, you never hear from him. You know what I
Sure.
mean? He never says anything. You're not gonna hear him complain anyways. But I think we've always talked to players about this defense and scheme and philosophy, and they always say, at the D line, they're the engine. They create a lot of disruption. They're the pressure creators. but the linebackers are the playmakers typically.
Yeah.
And so if the Bills can have two healthy linebackers in Bernard and Milano, that will not only help, the Bills defense overall, but I'm zoning in on the back half of that defense in the secondary. And you talked about some of those blown coverages today. That's kind of surprising, but not at the same time. It's surprising because usually the defense is ahead of the
Yes.
offense early in camp.
Absolutely.
That is typically the case. But I will say, if there are blown coverages, communication issues, if those type of things are happening early in camp on that side of the ball, maybe it's because of some of the changes and tweaks we're seeing with Bobby Babbage as a
Yeah.
defensive coordinator now. Not necessarily the play calling aspect of it, but maybe they're trying some new things. Now's the time to test out that menu that they created in OTAs and mini camps and whatnot. Now, maybe that's what they're trying to figure out, what they can do early in camp and test not just the scheme, but test the players within that structure and within those schemes.
Yeah, that's literally where my head is at. To exactly your point, like you usually day one is like, oh, the offense looked like crap, and it's like, okay, that usually happens. Everybody take a breath, but it was completely flipped on its head this time. And to your point, I'm chalking it up to, okay, maybe Babbage is trying some new things. We also have a new safety relationship with Rap and Hamlin. They've never played together before, and so kind of seeing that coalesce and how that merges and functioning that within Bobby Babbage, his calls, his structure, his tweaks. And again, he was running the defense from start to finish, the calls, the adjustments, everything was him calling it and running the show on that side of the ball. So that's my thought. Like maybe they're just trying to run some
Right.
different things, run some new things, kind of see what they can do. And
Spin
again,
differently,
yeah,
again, they don't have Hyde and Poyer back. They're kind of running things now,
yeah,
and there's some changes when you're talking the secondary staff, not just players. And so they're not able to just rely on those stalwarts at safety to run things back there, disguise things back there.
yeah,
So that's a feeling out period. So while I am surprised to a certain extent that some of those, coverages were blown, I also think that some of those other factors, not to make excuses, some of those other factors are going to play a part, especially early in camp when typically,
yeah.
as we said, the defense is usually ahead of the offense.
And I'm not putting anything into it's day one of camp. It's good
Right.
to see everything that happened. Everything could flip. Tomorrow, the offense could look like absolute crap and the defense could be amazing. Like it's day one of camp.
Mhm.
Everybody's ironing out kinks. Who they are now is not necessarily who they're going to be going into the season. So, yeah, I'm not. Although it was a little interesting, to say the least, that the offense was that much ahead of the defense, I'm not worried considering all the changes. Like you have a new defensive coordinator, a new corners coach, a new linebackers coach, a new defensive line coach. You have a ton of changes on that side of the ball. And then your players, the guys who ran the show and had a lot of communication. Granted, Bernard does a lot and Milano does a lot and
Right.
Taryn can, but like you said, Hyde and Poyer did so much. So there's a lot of things that they kind of have to work through. And I think they will. Exactly to Titan's point in the comments,
Yep.
give it time. Yeah, I think it'll come around.
Yeah, and I do think that hearing Hamlin was running with the one say that was kind of like, okay, all right, good
Same.
for him.
Yeah.
Like what a story he's been, obviously. And
Yeah.
to hear that he's been given a true opportunity a year removed from that. And I think it was McDermott or Bean that talked about in his presser today and how last year he was dealing in and seeing different things and having to overcome certain mental hurdles when it came to practicing, when it came to games and whatnot. So that's a whole nother challenge aside from, hey, I got to be ready for game day. I got to be ready for practice. I got to be ready for all those little things that come with it. Now he can just focus on football. Those things are kind of behind him. And now he can try to get back to where he was. Because when he did play a lot a couple years ago, he actually has some really good flashes to the point where, I mean, I definitely think he still could be, a starting safety in the NFL. How high that ceiling is, I don't know. But
Mhm.
I do think if we're talking this scheme and the scheme that, has become kind of the template, the too high quarters defenses, like he's played in that his collegiate and NFL career. I think he does fit, those type of schemes and those type of roles. The issue that he kind of dealt with when he was playing full time were the missed tackles. And so that does need to get cleaned up. But I mean, for the most part, I do expect him to understand this scheme and be able to play fast and not have to think now that he's again a little while removed from that injury.
And safety really, secondaries in general, but especially safety. Like I hate to give this answer, but like I trust in Sean McDermott. Like he's done it in Philly, he did it in Carolina. Like
Mhm.
he's making guys like Trey Boston and Kurt Coleman look like
Roman
Pro
Harper,
Bowlers. Yeah, Roman
41
Harper had
years old or
yeah,
something, like, he was
he
some
had no
ridiculous old
legs
man,
left. No
gray
legs left.
hair.
Yeah, he was like a 71 Madden speed when he was in Carolina, and McDermott made him extremely functional. Quentin McKell, back with Philly, who was playing
Philly, yep.
opposite of Brian Dawkins. Like McDermott knows how to coach that position up. He knows how to set those dudes up for success and mitigate their weaknesses and not set them up for failure. And so I hate to kind of just take the cop out answer of like, oh, I trust in McDermott with safeties and secondary play, similarly to how we trust in Cromer with offensive line.
Mhm.
But even within I was like, oh, that's nice. They're letting Hamlin run with the ones to start. And then it just continued the entire rest of practice. And I was like, oh, all right. But then again, like Edwards hasn't really practiced this summer a lot
Mhm.
because he's been banged up, and Cole Bishop's a rookie.
And they're
So
gonna bring him along slowly, Bishop, like,
yes.
that's expected. Hamlin's been in the system for many years. Yes, he's dealt with injuries and whatnot and, had his ups and downs, but he does know this defense, and Bobby Babich and this staff know him rather well and
Yeah.
kinda know where his ceiling may be, but also, more importantly, where that floor is and, ways that they can use him and not use him for that matter that won't put him out of position and really set him up to succeed more than fail.
Yeah. And if we think about it logistically, and maybe this is like hindsight being 2020, it kind of makes sense that Hamlin would start with the ones early on, given his knowledge and how high of a floor he presents and his familiarity with the coaching staff and vice versa, versus Edwards not practicing a bunch and Cole Bishop being a rookie. It's kind of like, I don't want to make this seem disrespectful to Hamlin, but it's kind of like the safe choice. Like put the
Mhm.
guy out there who started games in this defense, who we're comfortable with, who we know what to expect from him, and he's responsible and he's been in this scheme and system. Like you said, like in hindsight, it's kind of like, oh yeah, maybe this kind of seems like more of a no-brainer than we really gave it initially, and it shouldn't be that surprising.
So, were there any other takeaways that maybe we kind of overlooked from the offense or defense today? And you talked about Babbage a little bit. Did you see anything maybe from Joe Brady and his staff? Things that maybe stood out schematically, or just even things as simple as how they ran practice? Because that's obviously very important when you're a coordinator and coordinating practice and coaching up your coaches and having them teach the right things. Is there anything that stood out from the offense schematically from Joe Brady or how he ran practice?
I would say how he ran practice. Everything was purposeful with what they were doing. The substitutions in and out, the timing, the rhythm. There wasn't a lot of we got to the line and oh wait, what's the call? Or we messed up. All right, cool. Let's rehuddle up. Like this is what we want to get into. It was very bang, 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 bang. Every time a play would finish, Brady is getting the call in. He's kind of air traffic controlling a little bit and communicating with his coaches, and everybody seemed very locked in and on the same page offensively. It was a very tight ship, I would say. I'm sure Sean McDermott was so proud of the offense because it was very bang, 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 like nice and tight, neat and tidy. Joe Brady very much seemed to have, as right as he should, very much so seemed to have full control of the offensive side of the ball for the entirety of practice. The rhythm was very good. And in terms of how we ran the show and schematically, yeah, just to kind of hit back on the reduced formational width and how that tied into what they were doing and the 11 how successful they were out of both 11 and 12 personnel. What they were doing with Knox and Kincaid. Knox, actually had a couple touchdowns today in 7-on-7 and in team. He got some work just shifting between him and Kincaid and how they were lining them pre-snap and what they were doing post-snap, the route distributions they were involved in. And then even when they went 11, right now, again, early on, like Mac Hollins saw a ton of reps. It really looks like it's Hollins and Keon Coleman at that X with
Mhm.
snap share leaning more towards Mac Hollins, which understandable given he's a vet and what he does as a run blocker and known quantity. And then Curtis Samuel is that Z, Shakir in the slot, and just really attacking out of 11 personnel, but being able to work in MVS at a variety of spots and put defenses into a bind. So I think kind of leaning into the mismatch pieces early on was a nice schematic advantage they had, and Brady coordinated it really well.
And that's what I was kind of driving at. Did you see anything personnel wise when it came to 11 or 12? Because, for example, you talked about the red zone and the touchdowns that they scored. We heard it all day. And this was one of those plays that we talked about earlier, where Josh is throwing that seam ball or that deep, ball to Kincaid, high pointing it there. It looks like the Bills are at least in 12 personnel there, because you see Kincaid there, there's Knox, and then you see two receivers in the background right there. Along the far boundary too. So it looks like they're in 12 personnel there. So was there anything that kind of stood out there, or day one they were just kind of moving people in and out of there when you're talking, 11 personnel, one running back, one tight end versus one running back, two tight ends, like you see on this play?
I would say just how they moved everyone in and out. Like starting with Kincaid, especially, you would see him as your traditional like inline wide type of tight end. You would see him attached, kind of like winged or hipped off, but then he's the number 3 in the bunch. He's the number 2 in the bunch. He's like it's a 3-by-2 spread, and he's the slot to the 2-man side. And I mentioned too earlier, like the first rep of 7-on-7. He's next to Josh Allen in gun and then shifts out to the slot after. Like they did, I think, a very purposeful job of moving him around and allowing him to be put into advantageous situations from a mismatch creation standpoint, which I thought was good. And then Curtis Samuel was one too, who just moved around a lot just from a direct motion standpoint. And the running backs with the shifts, like Cook would be in the backfield and he would shift out into the slot, and then he would shift back into the backfield, and then he would run a tear motion and take off. Or they would they're in a 3-by-1 and he's motioning Cook out, and now Cook is the number 1 to the 2 receiver side. Just a lot of putting players in non-traditional alignments or places based on their position and seeing how the defense was reacting or not reacting, and then taking advantage off of it and being able to do it from a condensed look, but also from a spread look at the same time, or on the opposite hand, I should say. It was nice to see everybody kind of moved around, but it seemed very much Cook or Kincaid based in terms of like, we're going to use this chess piece and move them all over and see what we can do and the mismatches we can create. And he ate because of it.
That's awesome. So with that said, that kind of wraps up, day one. Tomorrow you're going to be out at Fisher as well, right?
I am. Yes, I'm going back again tomorrow.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, we'll have some more notes. Obviously, follow Anthony on social media, on Twitter, on X, and he'll fill you in on all the good nuggets and context from tomorrow's practice. So the other thing that kind of released this week when we're talking Buffalo Bills was the embedded. I'm not sure if you guys all got to take a look at that, but I thought, as is typically the case, there's some cool things that we could kind of glean from that episode, and it kind of ties into what we're talking about with Joe Brady here. And this is a segment of practice with Brady, obviously leading it with Josh Allen. So I'm gonna let it play so you can hear the sound, because this is something that we have talked about in the past, and it's a play that I've broken down with Cole Beasley himself. He's the one that actually taught me about this. Gabe Davis has broken it down with me behind the scenes, and it's what they used to call Saquon. It's basically an option concept versus usually too high coverage. So it sounds, again, this is my assumption, this is what Joe Brady is teaching to Josh Allen and his receivers on how to run it this year. And it's a little different than when they ran it with Cole Beasley, where Cole Beasley and Josh were just so in tune. And when Cole was going to sit, we saw some issues with that last year when they ran it. We're going to show you those issues, and we're going to show you when it did work. But listen in to some of this audio, some of these clips from Embedded this week from the Buffalo Bills.
Hey, because at the end of the day, sometimes you can't tell, is it quarters or is it cloud? Sometimes you're not getting a feel of it until I turn out of it, and now I feel it, and then that's when the quarterback kind of puts me into that window. Yeah, that's it. Hey, Ray, a little more. I don't want those guys to ever stop me. I want you to hold them up with the ball. Yeah. Love it.
All right, so there's some stuff to break down there. So you hear him talking about, Josh at the end there. Hey, Josh, I don't want them stopping. I want them running through it, or you throwing the ball a certain way to kind of slow them down, right? In the beginning, you see Kincaid kind of running that out route. And this, again, we've broken this play down several times. You hear Brady talk about, hey, we don't know if it's a cloud corner like this, kind of like you're seeing here, almost like a cover 2 type look, 2 safeties deep, or post snap, you could just see quarters where all these guys are bailing out. And then that out route that he's kind of teaching here in this concept is going to be followed by this slot defender. So let's break down this Saquon concept. Usually what the Bills like to do, you see the Bills running it here with Shakir and Diggs to the top of the screen. They get like a 2-man coverage here with Diggs on the outside. So Josh throws it to Shakir in the slot. And so the Saquon concept usually like a go route. And if the leverage kind of changes, you can see Diggs kind of, run that comeback route. Right here, usually it's just an option concept. A lot of times Beasley would just read it depending on the leverage of that slot defender. He sometimes would just sit, sometimes just getting out to the boundary, just kind of like a weak side option concept. And you can see Shakir, he does a good job of kind of tempoing this route here. And, the leverage of that slot defender was pretty obvious. So he's going to run away from that guy. This year, based on what Brady is saying right here, it sounds like they're teaching it a little differently. And they're not having him read that cornerback or that slot defender and kind of find that soft spot. It seems like they want him to run like an out route to get that corner to bite up. Because what happens when that corner bites up on, if this guy was going to jump this out route, what happens to this route right here? And we saw it several times from Gabe Davis right over the years.
Yeah, if that outside corner jumps that out route from Khalil Shakir here, the number 2 receiver, then all of a sudden that vertical route from your number 1 outside, in this case, Stephon Diggs, that then becomes open. And that's a way you can generate an explosive, which is something that this offense, they've talked about it this offseason a bunch. Brady's mentioned kind of wanting to generate some more explosives. And it's an aspect that even when the Bills offense was cooking down the stretch under Brady, they still weren't like this crazy explosive. They were just a good running team, efficient, and not shooting themselves in the foot. And so that can be an area where you generate that explosive. And like you said, how he's teaching it, you let that guy run through. And then now it's on Allen to, if he needs to stop him, quote unquote, he stops him by putting the ball in a location to make him kind of throttle down and stop him with the ball.
All right, and this Titan asks, if it's quarters, would the outside cornerback have his eyes in the backfield? So this is more, this is kind of what you're going to see from the corner. This is more of a cover 3 type look. So if it's quarter, these guys are just going to be bailing back. And so this slot defender is going to have to kind of read, Shakir and his route and kind of play it that way. There can be times where you're going to get a trap there from that corner. But if they're off like this, you're going to see these type of throws, regardless if it's, cover 2 or quarters. Coverage and that corner's off, and that's why you see that there. So I think by doing this, you're forcing that corner, whether he's a cloud or quarters, coverage corner, you're forcing that corner to jump that out route. Hey, I'm running full speed, you're running the out, from the slot. Get that corner to jump it, and if he doesn't jump, if he doesn't respect it, it's going to be wide open. If he does trap it, if he does jump it, like Titan's talking about, then you get that deep shot. So again, listen to what he's coaching here.
Because at the end of the day, sometimes you can't tell, is it quarters or is it cloud?
He's taking that onus off of the wide receivers of having to read that. Hey, you like, that's something, Cole Beasley did with the best of them all time. But he can read those coverages. It's very hard. And there were different times where the body language of Cole coming out of those routes was different. But him and Josh worked on it so much. There were times over the last couple of years since Cole left that it wasn't the case. Now Kincaid has some of that, and that's what you see Kincaid right there, and you're going to see him working on it. I think this is a little different in how they're teaching it. So again, let's listen through a little more.
Sometimes you're not getting a feel of it until I turn out of it, and now I feel it, and then that's when the quarterback kind of puts me into that window.
The quarterback's going to put them into that window, right? That's the key point. Again, when the team was asked, hey, whose offense is this? When Brady was asked, whose offense is this? What did he say?
Josh Allen's offense.
Josh Allen's offense. He's putting the onus on Allen now. He's not putting it on the wide receivers to read the coverages.
Yeah, that's it. So again, like stopping him with the ball and throwing him into that window, both of those verbiage pieces, exactly to like your point there, he's putting that onus on Allen. Like Allen is going to make you right if you're the wide receiver. You don't have to worry about like reading that corner, because again, to the point, you might hit that out and you're not seeing what that corner's doing until you break. And then you have to make a split-second decision in that moment. He's taking that off of the receiver, like you said, and he's putting that on Allen. Allen's able to survey and see everything.
Which is also important because, again, the wide receiver room is totally made over.
Yes.
Totally made over. I like Shakir. I think there is something there, as we saw in a couple of those plays, that I think they can work in that direction eventually. But I think overall, like this approach, I think it's actually kind of smart. And again,
absolutely,
it may lead to more consistency, but at the very least, it'll lead to quicker decision making from Josh Allen, because he'll know more than the wide receivers will know. And that'll lead to maybe less turnovers. We're going to show you 2 plays here in a second where they ran it and there was an interception. And so I like this coaching point. Let's listen a little more. See, you see Kincaid, he's running it. You talked about him in the slot, being flexed into the slot a lot today in practice. You see him running the out right there.
Yeah, that's it.
And you see him, he doesn't
Into
slow
that
down
window.
until he gets into that window between that slot defender, that supposed slot defender, and maybe that corner.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, Ray, a little more. I don't want those guys to ever stop me. I want you to hold them up at the ball. Yeah. Love it, love it, love it, love it.
I love it. I love it too. All right. And that's going to be something to watch. This is a play they've run for many years. Here are 2 plays.
I knew this was going to be one of them. I knew it.
So you see him. It's Diggs kind of reading the coverage and kind of tempoing down and really making that window and making that decision for Josh right there. And what does this corner do? He's kind of playing. This is what we say a cloud corner. He's not bailing yet. He's playing near the line of scrimmage, near that wide receiver. And Josh initially pumps the Diggs to try to hold that corner. Corner doesn't really bite on it, doesn't even step up. And now this throw is intercepted on the back end. Not a good throw really either. But this is why I think they are trying to tweak this play, Saquon, because it was so successful for many years, and they need to have this in the arsenal when they see these 2 high coverages.
It was so successful for those years, and to your point, because like Cole Beasley was just so awesome at running it. Like you need your quarterback and your receiver to be on the exact same page and seeing the right thing at the right time in lockstep with one another. It literally takes 2 to tango. Like it's when it works, it's indefensible, but it takes a lot for it to work. And you saw it on that one. Like it's easy for there to be a misfire or miscommunication. And even on that one, if Allen just puts the ball upfield a little bit more, it could still be a completion, which we've seen him make that shot before. And now this one against Philly, we see that cloud corner and he closes down and Allen's already firing at the Diggs, but the route gets jumped and we get an interception.
Yeah. And we saw the 2 plays earlier, Jags game earlier in the season, Commanders game earlier in the season. They're hitting that and teams picked up on it and they had over the years. But again, Cole Beasley ran it the same but different every single time.
He could win on it consistently no matter what.
It never looked the same every single time. And so that's why it was so successful. Watch this play. Watch Bradbury right here. He's calling out the play.
Yeah,
he's calling out the play right here. He's trapping. He tells the defenders right here what's going to happen. See, watch the trap here by him. And how he goes right there. He puts his right hand behind his butt. He says, number 1's running the go. And then there's a guy running out, and he's going to take him. You saw him right there.
And he even points to Reed Blankenship 32 after he does the hand motion, like number 1's going out. Yep. And he points to him. You cover me over the top because I'm jumping this slot route.
Yep. Exactly what we were talking about earlier. So I think this is putting the onus on Josh and not the receivers, not, guys like Diggs, guys like Coleman, Shakir. I think this is really going to be Josh Allen's offense. I think this is just one little nugget that I could find from Embedded that kind of highlights that when we're talking, again, Joe Brady's offense, maybe how different it is versus Ken Dorsey's.
And I think that also makes sense, too, to the point that you made earlier, right? Like you've got all these new faces, some of them, young, some of them vets, but it's a new team. It's a new system. It's a new scheme. There's new rapport and chemistry that has to be generated. So put the ball literally and figuratively into the hands of the guy who runs your team, and who happens to be a mutant, alien, unicorn type of dude in Josh Allen. And just let him rip it, and take the control. And if it's not a bad plan, like if you're going to go down, you might as well go down trying to let Josh Allen be Josh Allen and run the show while trying to simplify things. I'm also interested to see how they build from this throughout the year or going forward. Like, is this something that stays and works, or do they start to get more comfortable and add layers to it or responsibility to it?
They're going to have to, right?
Pass catchers, exactly.
Because if you're taking the option or leverage reads by those wide receivers away, where the same play call or concept could be different based on what they see on the leverage or the coverage overall, that you're taking that away. So now it's up to the OC to build the layers on top of it, build a different route stem that maybe looks the same, and then pump and go, or just little nuggets like that. Again, it's going to be in the hands of Joe Brady to design and call those plays when the defense is expecting it, and it's up to the Josh and to execute it, because again, it's going to be in his hands. And Charles, makes a great point, and I did not see or hear this interview yet, so I
Was
definitely
this
got
the
to
one
check
with
in on it.
Charles? Was this the one that he did with Robert Mays with The Athletic? I saw like a 2-minute
I
clip and it
saw the
looked awesome,
clip.
but I didn't
It
listen.
sounded awesome. Yeah.
Yeah,
So he
he was
says,
talking about Mike McDonald and how he respects him, but
yeah,
also hates that he's in the division.
it looks so good. I definitely
Yeah.
got to check it out. Charles said he listened to a McVay interview, and he talked about how the days of calling coverage beaters to each side of the field isn't enough with how defenses have evolved. I immediately thought of Dorsey. Man, the fact that you brought that to the film room just makes me so happy because it's
Charles is
something.
a film room watcher. He
Yeah,
watches
he's an
the show.
OG for sure because it's something that I will admit, I think we are the ones that created that whole thing. We're the ones that pointed that out when it came to, the coverage beaters with Dorsey early on and how they were working, but then it became stale. It became vanilla. They didn't build on it. That is something that we talked about in the film room for the last few years since Dorsey kind of took over as the OC, and even when he left, and kind of the differences we'd see with Brady.
Yeah.
But I definitely need to check out that interview if that's the case.
Yeah, and Charles confirmed it in the comments. So it is that one with Robert Mays from The Athletic. Anytime, man, McVay is just one of those dudes that I love to hear speak. Like, he's one of the true, like, good
Agreed.
architects of football right now on the offensive side of the ball. And when you get the opportunity to see those guys in like a candid interview and they're able to talk ball with someone,
shop, yeah,
right? It's so fun. Even him in that clip that you and I were talking about, where he's talking about what like Mike McDonald and what his defensive system does that he admires, but also hates going against if you're an offense, and just how he breaks it down and talks about it. And yeah, such a smart dude. And it's a really great interview, I'm guessing. So I'm excited to go back and watch that. And yeah, great pull from Charles. Just that Dorsey offense, when Dorsey's offense worked, and granted, maybe you could say this for a lot of offense, but when Dorsey's offense worked, it was beautiful. And the Bills looked like world beaters. But when it stalled out hard. And a lot of it comes down to, like Erik, like you said, what we pointed out, where it was like, okay, to your left, this beats cover 1. To your right, this beats cover 2. On the snap, go out, read the coverage, and then make it happen. And then baked into that is, hey, receiver, if they're playing this coverage, run this route. If they're doing that coverage, run this. And that's a lot of moving parts that you have to nail down to make everything work. But again, when it works, the defense has no shot. The problem is it takes a lot to make it work consistently.
Right. All right. So let's move on from that. That was cool. The Joe Brady stuff. I think that's going to be so much fun to watch, and how he's truly giving the keys to Josh and having him, make those quick decisions and making things a little easier for Josh so he can just play fast instead of thinking an issue that, again, I think Josh kind of ran into with Dorsey and being overly complex with a lot of things and a lot of leverage reads and concept reads and stuff like that. So let's get to some of the questions that we got for the mailbag, because there's a couple good ones that are going to be lengthy discussions. I want to start with one from Chris M., one of our insiders. He goes, what mechanics was Allen working on to improve? Anything on tape of the mechanics he's trying to improve? Maybe some before and after clips. And this was interesting because of the entire talk the last year when it came to Josh working out, not working out, injured, not throwing.
Yeah.
I feel like the Bills and their
people
PR
yelled at
department,
us.
yeah,
We
get
said
yelled at
mechanics
about
needed
it.
to work, and we got yelled at.
Yep. And when we really know some of the things that have occurred behind the scenes, and it's something that I think the Bills have kind of pushed almost over the top, this entire offseason. Like, see, Josh is working out. He's throwing with the guys. It's a big thing now. So Josh had said that this offseason he was throwing again, working on a few things. He said that his stride got a little wide, which can lead to his hip kind of locking out, and his delivery was elongated. A quote from him said, I wouldn't call it a complete overhaul of my throwing motion, but definitely some things to work on and clean up, getting long with my arm and a little bit with my stride. So it sounded like, those were the things that he was working on. And we do have some film of Josh in prior clips in prior years with good mechanics, and then showing you kind of, over the year and a half or so, where some of those mechanics kind of started to fall off a little bit. But it seemed like towards the end of last year, especially once Brady took over, there was a slight commitment to work on some of those things in practice, which is very difficult to do because most of the time in practice during game week, it's a lot of strategy, game plan stuff, not necessarily fundamentals.
No, yeah, you're expected to kind of have your mechanics in line by the time that season rolls around, because exactly like you said, once you're in season, it's film study, preparation, game planning, and attacking. And it's also funny, like when he was doing all the offseason stuff this offseason, and people were like, oh, but I thought he never works out. And it's like, just because he did it this offseason doesn't mean he was doing it the previous off seasons. And yeah, we saw that drop and dip in his mechanics a bit. Here he is.
So
this
pretty,
is a couple
dude.
seasons ago. Yeah, like you just his
look
mechanics really, yeah. Look, and this is all that work with Jordan Palmer, right? The base, the shoulder placement, like everything was just finely tuned because that was a huge area of opportunity for him.
Yeah, and just again, things to look at when we're looking at some of these clips from prior years, primarily 2020. But where he's holding the ball, his base, his legs, and how he doesn't really overstride, and how tight that delivery is where he's throwing from. He's not really throwing really too sidearm here, but it's the base that is really important for Josh. It's really what determines his accuracy or lack of accuracy many times. Here's against the Seahawks, hitting Isaiah McKenzie on that deep over route. Again, tight, compact delivery, even with the little shoulder fake, pump fake, resets his feet. And then, I mean, just look at the base. Look how he's rotating through, having this normal base and not elongated, or having your feet outside your shoulders and frame. It allows you to rotate through. It allows that front hip, that left hip to rotate through, that core to rotate through. So it's not all arm. And you can see it from this end zone angle. And I think what we saw last year was, he kind of did that, and, maybe it's something to do with, the injuries over the years and being banged up last year. But his delivery was a little off last year. And of course, that's very important when it comes to, not just accuracy, but pinpoint placement. Look at the base here. Look at how tight he is. Rotational. It looks effortless, but then look at the placement of it to Beasley between two defenders down the field. Like, this is the type of mechanics that I miss from Josh Allen. It was great to hear him go back to his roots and mapping out his kinematic sequencing. And when it comes to being a rotational thrower, going back to the lab and refining that craft. And then again, getting together with his guys to work, the receivers and tight ends to kind of work on that rapport when it comes to throwing and catching the ball.
Yeah. And like you said, the base, and he's upright, he's rotating through with his throwing shoulder, and it's clean, it's precise. And then his non-throwing arm, so his left hand, he's kind of biting the burger right there, like I like to say at the end. Everything is just compact, it's tight, there's no wasted motion or wasted movement, there's nothing too loose. And then you juxtapose it with this type of throw where his back foot is completely off the ground. He's heavily leaning onto that front foot. And that's where you see the leg is locking out. The front hip is locking out. Yep. That front hip is locked out. That front leg is locked out by extension. And then look at his throwing arm, just how far it is away from his body. He has to try and make the effort to come through, but isn't able to naturally rotate through, and it widens out.
Exactly what that front hip does when you have a wide base or you're overstriding. You lock out that front hip, and you think about the movement of throwing and how it's fluid and smooth. Essentially, what's happening with that front hip, because of that overstride and that wide base, it's throwing on the brakes. So it's throwing off that kinematic sequencing and making that pass inaccurate. And so you saw things like that happen all the time. Look at it from the end zone angle. It gives you a better idea on how, again, how that locks out. And you can see that his whole body is tilted, trying to make that throw to his right side there. So it's inaccurate to Diggs. Here's another one versus the Eagles, where you kind of see those brakes get thrown on off of play action right there. I mean, you can see it once again right here, throwing off to his right. You see it lock out, and then just how it just looks clunky, right? It doesn't look smooth and efficient. And that's why that pass is just a little bit off to Shakir, when if this is placed properly, Shakir is going to get some yards after this catch.
Yeah. And that's been the killer at times. Like it starts with the footwork, like you said, and he has poor footwork or a poor base, and that leads to a lack of rotation or lack of tightness in his throwing motion, which leads to, it's funny, this throw and the previous one to Diggs, both similar results, where they're too far out in front, they're too far out wide because he's locking out. He's not able to fully rotate through the throw. He's not bringing his body with him. And I know quarterback mechanics, I think isn't something that everyone can readily spot, but I think it's easier for people to understand a little bit of it in kind of conjunction with a pitcher. And think of how pitchers finish. When they finish, that throwing arm comes through across their body, their back leg comes over. You think about that rotation, think about that fluidity. Imagine how a pitcher would be able to throw or not be able to throw if they locked out that front leg and weren't bringing their whole body through. Like, they wouldn't be able to pitch.
Yeah, and just again, when it comes to Josh, and one thing he worked on in that 2020 offseason was his ability to keep his eyes and shoulders and head, stable. And you see him kind of just bouncing here. You can see him just bouncing. He's not steady there. And then you see him right there. It's not efficient. And then, I mean, we've chronicled his misses deep and how this could have changed a lot of narratives. It's just something that popped up a lot in his game. Here's another one. He misses digs deep, and this guy's wide open. This is likely a touchdown, but he lacked the ability to rotate through here because you see that front leg kind of lock out. Yes, there's pressure in his face, but he still can execute this pass, and you can see even the elongated delivery there. It's not tight. He's not necessarily biting that burger. Like, he's not holding that left hand close to his chest and biting that burger. And you can see that, winding motion where his shoulders tilted here. That's all things that he had worked on in prior years with Jordan Palmer, and he misses there. It's just something that, showed up a bunch at times last year. Can he still make these type of passes without the mechanics? Absolutely. But to be consistent in those big moments, you have to stay tight with your mechanics and that muscle memory. He always talks about golf and how he can feel things, whether he's playing golf or throwing. He needs to hone in more when it comes to those muscle mechanics. And you saw how he was kind of, bouncing all over the place and in that Patriots game and even that last row. But just watch his feet and his lower body here, how they're just so nice. Balls of his feet, quiet. Just calm, quiet, just, slowly moving his eyes with his feet. Like, you didn't see that all that often from Josh last year. But it is nice to see him, again, working on that craft in the offseason. And here's a clip from practice. I think it was the embedded practice, but watch the base here. Watch him rotate through. Like, look how tight his feet are, in rhythm he is. Like, that's the type of passer we need to see from Josh so that he can be, he can place balls properly. We always talk about general accuracy and placement. Josh is generally accurate, but if he wants to be consistently placing the ball where it needs to be, which this year, more time, it needs to be, it's more important because he has guys that are bigger, not necessarily speedy guys, fast guys that are creating separation with their physical traits. A lot of those timing plays and these quick plays have to be concisely placed, and so that the wide receivers and guys catching the ball can do something after the catch. And that'll come back to Josh's mechanics and how well he's honed them in this season.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of kind of what they showed today in practice and what I've talked about a bunch this offseason. We've talked on the show about as well. Like, if they're going to go to more condensed formations and like reduce their formational width, a lot of those plays are based on timing and rhythm for the quarterback. And so you have to be on point with your footwork and your arm and your mechanics. And I like the point that you made, like, can Allen make throws when his mechanics aren't pretty or aren't clean or aren't perfect? Yeah, he can, but it's hard to do that consistently, to consistently live in a world where you're making throws that are just arm and lack rotation and you don't have a proper base. Odds are eventually that's going to come back to bite you a little bit. And this one's so pretty. That one that you just showed is very like Tom Brady-esque. Like, think of that front shoulder, but like you said, biting that burger again, and everything is like that front shoulder is tucked. He's able to rotate through. You're not getting elongated. Your base is there. It's all tight and nice. Yep, you see there's the throwing motion in his left hand. Hand comes to the mouth to bite that. But yep, he's rotational. Like, you're using your body. You are generating power through, again, there's a lot of similarities between multiple sports, but similar to baseball, again, like, you're generating that power with your hips. It's that rotation. You're not just arm throwing. Yes, you throw it with your arm, but that power and that delivery starts with your base, and you transfer that energy through and rotate it through and power it through the throw. And if your base isn't proper and your arm motion is getting elongated and farther away from your body, you're making it harder to put velocity on the ball and, more importantly, placement and accuracy.
And I kind of disagree with what Mass is saying here. I think he says this is the result of poor coaching. No one is on this coaching staff has the ability to elevate Allen's game. We talked about it earlier. During the season, game week, these coaches aren't, Kyle Shanahan told us straight up, they're not teaching fundamentals necessarily. Do they put them through the fundamental drills? Yes, but they're not honing mechanics all the time during the week because they're working on strategy. They're working on game plan. They're working on other things. The offseason is when those things happen. That's why guys like Jordan Palmer exist and those trainers exist, because that's what they focus on. They're not focused on them running plays and concepts and all that. They will work on, hey, you need to place the ball here when this guy's running this route because you guys run this a lot. But more times than not, they're working on these type of things. They don't have time during the week to work on those things a lot. So I will disagree with Mass there. Again, Google or search on Twitter, Kyle Shanahan talking about it. He tells you straight up, it's not something that they can work on during the week.
Yeah, it's not. I don't want to put it like solely on a player, but yeah, like you don't have time, and you shouldn't need to have the time to work with a quarterback on his mechanics in season. In season is game planning. It is matchup specific. It's we're focusing on the opponent, what's going into the playbook, what can we put in, and the rhythm of how a practice goes. It's not like JV or varsity football where like everybody goes into individual and the quarterbacks spend 15 minutes working on fundamentals and footwork and arm. Like, no, those 15 to 20 minutes are used for throwing to the receivers or installing this or putting this in. It's not,
we talk about it all the time, right? Like we talk about practice sessions, practice segments are building blocks for the team period. So when you're out of camp tomorrow, watch the beginning of practice when they're doing individuals, when they're doing one-on-ones. All of those segments are context for the 7-on-7. It's what they're going to be running in team periods in 7-on-7. So one of the Titans says, wouldn't the QB coach be the one to the yes and no? Again, the QB coach is worrying about, hey, these are the players we're going to be running this segment. Your eyes need to be here. You need to be getting the ball to this guy, like the different nuggets for this game plan. They're not drilling every day. They're not drilling mechanics, guys. Again, I think that's misunderstood.
Absolutely. Like, and the QB coach, I also want to put it to like, if there's something bad mechanically happening, like the QB coach will be like, hey, your front side's flying out a little bit more. Try and keep that, tucked a little bit more, keep that tight. But so they're going to coach that. They're not going to just be like, oh, his mechanics suck, but oh, well, we don't have time. Right. So they're going to mention it and coach it. But what Erik is saying, it's not going to be like, okay, we need to fix your mechanics in this practice. And also it's not something that can get fixed in one practice. Erik has said it multiple times, that muscle memory that has to get generated. You have to do it with repetition after repetition throughout the offseason, throughout your year.
Yeah. And if Josh getting hurt, hurting his elbow, hurting his hand or whatever, something happens, he told you straight up, he changed his delivery because of it. So again, things happen and they're fluid. And so I think that maybe most fans don't realize what actually practice is all about during a game week and what is actually worked on when they're doing drills. So again, go out to practice tomorrow, watch each period and watch how it builds on the team periods and the 7-on-7s or 11-on-11s, because it's the context that, we always point out when we're at practice. And when they're doing high point passes and one-on-ones to the receivers, why do you think they're practicing that? Because they have plays in the lower red zone that they're going to use later where they're throwing that. So
that's such a great thing. Like, look at, for those who went to practice today, look at what they were doing for the quarterback to receiver throws, which are high point throws and certain routes building inside that they used in the red zone work. And then 7-on-7 was in the low red zone. And then when they got into team, it was low red zone and red zone in general. Exactly Erik's point. Everything builds and builds and builds and builds. And that's not even taking into account things like the position coaches, for example, like a QB coach. He might be responsible for like putting in the third down package that week or the early down run scheme or something like that. That's that's something we've talked about on this show too. Like the position coaches are involved in the game plan.
They usually have a portion of the game plan. Yeah. Exactly. Like you said, specific situations, 3rd and 6 calls. Hey, what blitzes do they run? And like they have to create part of the game plan for the coordinator. It's not just a coordinator doing everything.
It'd be impossible.
He dishes out, certain, priorities and responsibilities to each of those coaches.
Yeah. And it may sound kind of crazy, but doing all of that and then finding the time to rebuild a QB's mechanics, you don't have the time to do that. And again, you shouldn't need the time to do that. Like, that's not what in-season practice is for, even really for what camp is for. And again, if some things are getting crazy, the coaches are going to mention it and try and like tell them to correct it. But also just based on where you are, you can't rebuild a quarterback's mechanics once the season starts. You don't have enough time for repetition and muscle memory building and the kinesiology of all of it to get that muscle work and mental work tied together. That's what that offseason is for.
Right. And to kind of wrap that, Titan says, so it's really on Josh to do that before and after class. Yes. And that is something we talked about and we've heard.
We got yelled at for it.
Yeah. And we got yelled at for it. And it's something that, again, I think you see it. It's because, again, I'm not going to disclose the stuff that we had heard over the last couple of years, but we've talked about it in prior film rooms. So if you missed out, that's on you. But it is on Josh to kind of do those things and keep those things tight and on point. But okay, we're running a little late here. We're running a little behind. It's like an old school film room.
I would say since the season started, it's like a regular season. Yeah.
This is fun stuff to talk about. So I'm going to flip the script. We had a question and topic from NFL Draft Fanatics, Jim, our boy Jim, one of our insiders, and he had questions about blitz tendencies for the Bills defense. Which players and positions and down and distances did blitzes come from for the Bills last year? And maybe what can we expect from Babbage this year? And so we got some stats together for you, got a little graph for you. So let's look at how they operated last year, 2023. The Bills, in as far as pressure percentage goes, they were 9th in pressure percentage, as you can see in the graph, but they were 29th in blitz percentage. So they didn't blitz a lot overall relative to the league, as you can see on the bottom of that graph. And so when you heard Bob Babbage talk about, you know, some mentors that he had in the league when he went on Erik Wood's show.
Erik, we got to pause. Titan, who's been going back and forth in the chat, and we've been having a good conversation with him. He dropped a $50 super chat and said, loving the hard work. So that's super awesome. We sincerely thank you for that. One, just you being here and your presence and the honest questions and the learning and the back and forth with us. That we had really good questions that aren't just like dickhead questions where you're trying to like sun us with a question. Like we can tell there's a genuine back and forth, and then this, which is cool enough. And then the super chat, that's super awesome. Thank you so much for that, man. That's awesome.
Appreciate that, man. That's awesome. You know, we'll take those kind of interruptions. It's very humbling when it comes to those type of donations and super chats. So thank you very much, Titan. And back to the pressure. Okay. If you guys got a chance to listen to Erik Wood's podcast, he had Bobby Babbage on. And Babbage talked about some inner circle, some guys that he looks up to, calls upon to talk ball and craft with. He mentioned 2 guys, Ryan Nielsen and Aaron Glenn. You know, so Nielsen was the DC for Jacksonville last year. Aaron Glenn's the DC for Detroit. And so I pulled up some of those stats. And again, you can kind of see, you know, where those guys and those defenses kind of stand in regards to that. You can see Detroit, their pressure percentage is pretty high over here. But they also, you know, don't blitz all that much. And so when you're looking at pressure percentage, the Bills last year, you know, again, they did a great job when it came to pressure percentage. Detroit had pressure percentage of 52%, specifically on third downs. Again, the money downs. We want to talk money downs. We want to talk those situations, those high leverage situations. They were 2nd in pressure percentage. Detroit was on third downs at 52%. Jacksonville, 44.6%. That was 16th. Now, if we're talking blitz, and this is where it comes to Jim's question, and again, Bobby Babbage, what he may do this year, who he calls on, defenses that maybe you guys could study to get ideas, and that maybe Bobby Babbage did last year. When it came to blitz percentage, again, Bills were 29th at 21.5% on third down. Detroit was 38.5%, which was 6th overall. And then Jacksonville was 11th at 33.2% blitz percentage on third down. Anthony, Bills this year, what are you expecting from Babbage being the architect of the defense? We'll figure out if he's actually calling it. What are you expecting when it comes to blitz percentage this year under Babbage and Sean McDermott?
As we get into that, I'm taken aback by like how much Detroit and even especially Detroit, but Jacksonville blitz, considering like how good their front fours are just with what they've invested. Like, I mean, McNeil went down for the Lions last year, but like having Hutch and having Houston and McNeil, and then the Jags with their Josh Allen and everybody that they've had rolling up front, like seeing them also add pressure via the blitz is just another level. And we saw it firsthand with the Jags. I am expecting some more of those 5 and 6 man pressures from the Bills, kind of similar to, not even just because of, you know, this tie-in with Babbage and the Lions and the Jags, but seeing what the Bills defense was last year in those first 4 games before Milano went down, before Daquan Jones went down. And so I don't necessarily think they're going to become like a 40% blitz team. But on those third downs, I expect to see more 5 and 6 man pressures, more creepers, and more sims, more than just, okay, we're rushing 4 and that's going to, and maybe we'll throw like a 2-man game or, an exit stun or something, from one of the sides. I do expect to see more of a pressure package. Sometimes, again, an actual blitz with 5 and 6 man blitzes or pressures, or just a creeper or a sim that won't count as a blitz because it's still only a 4-man rush. But I do expect to see more of an aggressive nature up front from the front 7 and from the front in general, just given that, tie in with the Lions and the Jags, but more importantly, or I guess more so for me, what this defense looked like those first 4 weeks before Milano and Daquan Jones went down, where they were really playing on the front foot and doing a lot of disguising and attacking from the second level and front line.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because if you look at some of the best defenses last year, and we talked about a couple of them, but one that isn't really talked about was run by Brian Flores, Minnesota. Cover 0, just
blitz
all out blitzes. Like,
yeah.
Teams are going to study what he did last year. He was doing something not revolutionary because we saw it when he was in Miami, and he taxed and flustered Josh a lot when they, ran a lot of those cover 0 pressures. And again, maybe showing cover 0, mugging all the gaps and popping out different guys.
Real quick, per SIS, Minnesota's blitz percentage last year was 49%, which was first in the league.
It's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah,
that's
nuts. And so I do think that teams are going to study that a little more. And if we assume that, you're going to see some of these offenses kind of go back to some run game stuff, I do think some of those pressures and blitzes can disrupt those run games as well, en route to the quarterback and flustering quarterbacks and not letting them dictate. So it'll be interesting because I do think a lot of teams are going to study Brian Flores' defense last year. It was that revolutionary. Steve Spagnuolo, he's another guy that always brings these exotic pressures at those, those moments where you're like not expecting it. Yeah. And just looks like you're overloading one side and then just brings guys from the other side, especially defensive backs. I think that's what we're going to see more of. I think we're going to see more pressures and blitzes from the secondary elements of the Bills, those safety blitzes, those Taron Johnson pressures. I think we're going to see more of that. Now, it'll be interesting to see what they play on the back end, because if you're talking Jacksonville, they played a lot of match coverages, more zone when they did send the blitz. They played zone 63.1% of the time when they sent an extra pass rusher, which was 3rd overall, as opposed to Detroit, where they're more of a man-based system with Aaron Glenn. They played more man coverage 68.5% of the time on 3rd downs when they sent pressure. So it'll be interesting to see how they mix it up, because more times than not, as you said, the Bills don't blitz a lot, but they did use those sim and creeper pressures. So I expect McDermott and Babbage to mix it up a little more and send pressures a little more, especially if we're talking those 3rd down situations for the Buffalo Bills next year. It's something you don't want to just sit back there. You want to see, and maybe that had something to do with some of those breakdowns today. I don't know if those were blitz situations, but I think you're going to live and die by some of those, especially if they figure out that, hey, they're not getting quite the pressure that they thought they would with their front 4.
And then pairing that with something we talked about a couple weeks ago with like how much Christian Benford is in press. And we know how comfortable Rasul Douglas is in press. And press doesn't necessarily mean jamming. And you could be in press and bail. You could be in press and you can. That whole idea of just squeezing those windows and making things tighter and harder for an offense, especially on 3rd downs. Maybe they're pairing some of that too. And maybe that's what we see with that addition of Jamil Adai and more man coverage on the back end. Maybe we're seeing more man coverage on 3rd down because they're sending these exotics and attacking the QB on 3rd down. And so they're playing more man coverage on the back end, or even if they're matching it, which plays out like man in those instances. I think that could be a fun spin as well. I think either way, I think we do expect more kind of an attack-minded nature for this defense and playing on that front foot. And it makes sense given the skill sets they have at the second level and how that fits in with how their cornerback grouping is, what the safety grouping is looking like right now, and then what the front is. Unless maybe they don't have to because Von Miller turns back into prime Von Miller and they're just like, screw it, we'll just rush 4 because he's going to win every time.
Yeah, there's some different elements in that room as well when it comes to the defensive line and how they roll those things. And again, on top of the philosophy and scheme that changes that we could see with Babbage at the helm. It's going to be interesting, man. Football's here. And I'm glad, you know, we got some little nuggets from embedded, some practice stuff, video stuff that we got to break down. It's stuff that I hope you guys can now pay attention to at practice tomorrow and going forward, but also in the games, and how, you know, that context gets fleshed out at practice. And then you'll see it in the games. You'll see Joe Brady and those and Josh Allen and those receivers working on those specific things in that Saquon concept. It's going to be fun to kind of watch that develop over the next year or so with Brady at the helm. But before we get out of here, send us your questions. Charles has one right here that I'm sure you would love to answer. Do you think that the condensed formations under Brady will open up the Bills?
I clicked on it at the same time you did. Sorry.
Open up the Bills to more blitzes, amoeba fronts, etc. Go ahead and run with that one. That's a good question from Charles.
Yeah, I think it can, because if you're going with more condensed formations, you're kind of inviting more bodies in and around the line of scrimmage versus going spread, where you're flooding space with your bodies pre-snap, which is forcing the defense to kind of have to spread themselves out, and you kind of make them declare a little bit. It helps you identify coverages or identify fronts, and then see, you know, who's coming, who's blitzing, because you are spread out. It's easier to identify. So I do think, yeah, if they do go condensed formations under Brady, or going with more of them, it does open you up to that, because there are more bodies around the line of scrimmage. It's easier for a defense to kind of disguise what they're doing
100%.
because you're condensed. So they're kind of condensed as well, which means it's easier for them to switch out and do different things post snap and disguise it pre-snap.
Yeah, that's the crucial key when it comes to spread versus the condensed formation, the tighter formational width, is that it gives the defense a little more ability to disguise who's coming or who's dropping and do those sort of things. And it also, generally, when you're talking those type of formations, relatively speaking, spread versus condensed, it's also going to slow down the offense a little more. I do think that the tempo gets ratcheted down. Under Dable, they were spread everything, tempo, fastball. And it's interesting to watch that revolution and evolution over the years when it comes to Josh Allen, offenses he's played into, what we're going to see this year. Bigger wide receivers, more tight ends, more physical at the point of attack. When we're talking mentality, when we're talking, you know, the scheme and concepts that they're going to run, the condensed formation, to get more blockers at the point of attack, especially big wide receivers that are good at blocking, like Keon Coleman. I think that it does allow the defense to do some different things, but if you're getting a hat on a hat, it does open up some things for the offense. And especially if we can get Josh under center more, utilizing play action,
boots, yeah,
half naked, you know, naked rollout, stuff like that.
Yeah,
that will take Josh's game to the next level, because it's not something that they've done a bunch of, primarily because of how defenses have stayed at home on the backside of those plays and really not bit on the run and just said, you know what, we'll let them run that. If the running back gets 6, 8, 10 yards, we'll take that. We'd rather have that than Josh pull it, get outside the pocket, and hit those big plays down the field. But hopefully they force that hand more this year with some of the formations, some of those looks. You talked about the motions with Samuel, you know, and things like that. I'm hoping that he can incorporate some of those things and do some things on offense with movement, shifting personnel, to get Josh on the perimeter more within structure and not just in, you know, extending plays and scrambling. Because if they can do that and hit some of those 3-level passing concepts that we saw in Josh's first year to Robert Foster, Zay Jones, I mean, a multitude. Andre, what was that guy's name? The speedster. I mean, no, not the speedster, not him. Deontay Thompson.
Oh,
like
yeah,
guys like that, you know, like those speedsters that hit the 3 levels. Like if they can do some of that stuff within structure and get them to again, respect that run game from under center, that's when you see Josh really excel with the ball handling, get on the perimeter, get those 3-level options. Like that's when it becomes fun. If they can somehow incorporate some of that, you know, McVay, Shanahan coaching tree that is contagious around the league, that'll be interesting to see Josh in that consistently.
And that's where those condensed formations come in. Like you look at the 2 lowest teams last year in terms of formational width, where the 49ers were the lowest and the Los Angeles Rams were the 2nd lowest. And who was the 3rd lowest? The Miami Dolphins, Shanahan tree. Who was the 4th lowest? The Houston Texans, Shanahan tree. And then you had Ben Johnson and the Lions at the 5th lowest. But those run schemes, specifically zone, but you can even get to duo out of these condensed looks and some other options and is in gap schemes because you have so many bodies around the line of scrimmage offensively. But that's where you really hit them with those explosives. You go play action, you go boot, because you're able to make your run look like the pass. And if you can suck in those defenders, ooh, some really juicy stuff could really go. We got I like this question from Lauren. This is a good one from Walter, who was kidding. He said, from scale of MVP to Hall of Famer, how impressive were those TD grabs by Justin
Is this
Shorter?
Kyle? I could have swore Kyle asked this question earlier. Is this his burner account?
That's kind of funny. I like that. And then I like this one from Lauren, who says, who is your surprise pick to make the 53 man?
Who? I don't know. That's a tough one.
Off of today, I'm going to say KJ Hamler.
I would love that. I would love that because, again, he someone else mentioned that, in the chat, that the Bills are focusing on big physical guys like that at wide receiver. Were the guys besides, Curtis Samuel that can beat man coverage or can win with speed? Hamler could help in that department, but also on special teams. Man, when he was at Penn State, he was fun to watch.
And I thought when he went to Denver, I was like Sutton, Judy, and Hamler. Like, oh my God. Like, I was a Hamler fan at Penn State, man.
I like that. Yeah, I'll piggyback. I like that one. I think that would be fun for multiple reasons when it comes to the Bills roster.
And he was one of the, I put it on a tweet earlier and I don't remember. He was one of the 6 guys getting work as kick returner. It was him, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, Andy Isabella, Darrington Evans, and I'm missing one more, but Hamler was getting work there. And he honestly had a couple really good routes in 7-on-7 and even in team. The speed showed up, but the footwork was crisp and clean. So yeah, I could see him, especially considering how big bodied.
Let me piggyback that real quick before I wrap. Give us a little preview on what you saw and thought about that part of the game, special teams. Obviously it was cool. Some of the nuggets that you pulled out when it came to, how they're doing things and scheme up things. Cause now it's going to become more of a play. And so there's going to be a little more strategy to it. Did you see anything that stood out when it came to day one in the special teams department?
Oh, great question. I completely forgot about this. This was super cool. So they're doing drills for special teams first, and they're doing 3-on-3 coverage versus return grouping. And for those who don't know, the kickoff group, the coverage unit is on the 40, the opponent's 40. And then the return group is basically on or around their 35. So you actually have 5 yards apart. And so they're doing 3-on-3 work. And the coverage unit is just doing spikes and stunts and loops. And it looks like defensive line versus offensive line. And then they get an actual full kick or for full special teams, and it's full kickoff versus full kick return. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing these long loops. You're seeing spikes. You're seeing games left and right. It was a super cool thing. In addition to seeing right now, it looks like they're, from a coverage standpoint, they're leaning into more linebackers, edges, wide receivers for their body types. And then like Cam Lewis, who is always on special teams. But the body types that they leaned into was cool. But also just the schematics of it, like seeing that play out. I was wondering, like, how are they going to cover? Who are the body types they choose to use? And yeah, it was playing like offensive line versus defensive line. You were seeing long loops from a guy like 4 people away and where he's attacking and where they're trying to push the returner. It was very one gap penetrating games up front.
And that's interesting because again, it is like a play, but like when you're comparing it to old kickoff rules, there usually were specific lanes. It was always talk about lanes. So if you're getting a looper, who's a replacement? And if that replacement is out leveraged by the blocker and walled off, there's going to be a big return. Like maintaining that integrity, that rush integrity, that lane integrity, that gap integrity as those gaps move, that is going to be wild to see. I'm excited to watch that.
Because exactly, like I'm the same mindset as you. Like I remember my first introduction on varsity was like kickoff coverage, and I was like, stay in my lane, stay in my lane, stay in my lane. Yeah. And so seeing that happen, I was like, whoa, but it so presents some cool opportunities, but how vulnerable does it leave you? That was a really cool thing that I wasn't anticipating. And usually when they do special teams work, it's like, okay, special teams work, but this was like cool. I was glued to the field while they were doing it. It was super awesome.
No, speaking of super awesome, man, that was a fun episode. Yes, I'm happy that football's back.
Football's back.
Yeah, I'm really happy. That was some great conversation. Thanks to everyone in the chat room that showed up tonight. thanks to our insiders for bringing those topics. We couldn't even get to all the questions. We're already an hour and 40 minutes in. We couldn't get to all the questions because the two that we covered with the mechanics and the defensive side of the ball and the blitz tendencies, like that was some great discussion. And then you guys brought the heat in the chat room. So once again, thank you to everyone for showing up, especially thanks to, Titan and again, bringing the heat, bringing the super chat. We appreciate it. You guys were awesome tonight. Anthony, what are you looking forward to tomorrow? Wrap us up here. What are you looking forward to at practice tomorrow at St. John Fisher?
I'm going to focus on some offensive line. I didn't really do that today in terms of drill work or just my eyes on them in team. So more eyes on the offensive line and really on the defensive line too. So more trench work tomorrow in general. And then continuing to focus on the rookies and where they fit. Keon, Coleman, Ray Davis, Cole Bishop, seeing how things progress in that regard. And maybe a little more. Maybe we get some one-on-ones tomorrow with cornerbacks versus wide receivers. I don't think we will. I think that's going to be weekend stuff. But yeah, I'm really focused on some trench work tomorrow because I saw flashes and saw things here and there, but I wasn't too focused on it in drill or team. So I'm really excited to dive into the trenches tomorrow.
Well, I'm jealous of you. You get to go out there, watch practice again, day 2 at Fisher.
Yeah, but next week you're going to be there and you're probably going to get multiple padded practices. So you got me beat, man. Yeah.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, next week, I'll be there.
Yeah, we'll be there on Sunday together, which is awesome.
Yep. And it'll be interesting to see once those pads come on. Hopefully it is. It'd be nice if it was Sunday or Monday. I'll be happy with that. I typically like to go to those practices, but still jealous of you to open up today, day 1 at Fisher, and have fun tomorrow again at day 2 practice. And again, thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. Couldn't do any of this without you guys. It's been fun. And, from here on out, man, you guys are going to be getting a lot of camp updates, whether guys like Anthony are on the ground reporting or, again, on the shows every single night on the Cover One Sports Network. We appreciate everyone's support, night in and night out in the off season, during the season. Yes. We appreciate all the support.
And it wouldn't be a Josh Allen episode if we didn't get yelled at for talking about Josh Allen, not Sunshine and Rainbows, being told Josh is the team. All this nitpicking is hilarious. Oh, man. Good times. Football's back. The season is back. Those comments just kick it right off. Well done. Appreciate it, Sal. And everybody in the chat, thank you guys so much for tuning in, for spending your Wednesday evening with us. Thank you again to Titan for your super chat. And really just everybody, like Erik said in the chat, the back and forth with each other, with myself and Erik, the questions, the learning, the dialogue, all of it. This is why we do this show. And it's tremendously rewarding to see the chat engage and the back and forth. So it's absolutely tremendous for us. So thank you very much. If you're here on YouTube, watching live right now or watching later, please, and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that is cool as well. Please rate and review and subscribe. If you are not an insider, if you have not signed up for One Pass, it is our premium content. A lot of, we say it all the time too, like, we're not a news breaking brand, but we know a lot of things. A lot of things get put in there for the insiders. They get a lot of breaking news and information that doesn't drop until weeks later from an NFL standpoint and from that Bills standpoint with what gets communicated. And the Discord channel is really where everything is at. Like we talked about earlier, the multitude of different channels, whatever your flavor, fantasy football, Bills stuff, there's food stuff, and like everybody just gets in everything. It's a great community of like-minded, passionate Bills and football fans. As Erik has that graphic queued up there, that One Pass Club access, again, gives you exclusive members-only content, further in-depth analysis, scheme, play, player breakdowns. And also now that it's on Discord, we have the ability to go live and post video within that Discord community and take things to another level that we didn't have previously with Slack. $60 a year. So if that is, kind of fits your fancy, we welcome that. And a lot of those, Erik, we talk about all the time, those One Pass subscriptions, super chats, all that kind of stuff. A lot of it is the reason why we're able to do what we're able to do.
Yeah, all the technology you saw tonight, Huddle, all the, stats memberships, Sports Info Solutions, Pro Football Focus, background edits are, everything you see us present on a show like tonight, we couldn't do without our insiders, without our support, whether you're an insider or even just, again, sharing our YouTube link, sharing our podcast audio. Anything and everything helps the brand, helps the film room. and everyone at Cover One to track and trend. So once again, couldn't do this without you. And thanks for joining us tonight in the film room.
And yeah, word of mouth is also tremendously appreciated. That's how this brand started. So if you thought this show was awesome or the brand is great, tell your family and friends and loved ones about all of that stuff. If you're at training camp tomorrow, feel free to get at me. I will be there baking in the sun as I was today. I ran out of sunscreen early on after I applied it. I didn't realize I was that low on my sunscreen stick. So that was a fun aspect. I'm trying to study the tape and get better, so that won't happen to me tomorrow. So feel free to get at me at camp tomorrow. Anyone going to camp, be safe, travel well. In general, we hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. We will see you next Wednesday for another episode of the Cover One Film Room. But until then, I'm Anthony Prohaska. That's Erik Turner. That'll do it for us in this episode. Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.